Hello, my name is Rohit. I am from CSE Core second year afternoon slot, and I'll be demonstrating my DBMS project. So, just a second. So, once I open my code folder here, this is my project, DBMS project, and I'll run the project and give a run through of the code side by side. So, let's do that. So as soon as I click on run, you can see this interface opens up. Well, the main entry point of the app is here, this SQL app class, which makes a new connection page. So a connection page is another Java class that renders this front end right here. So the connection page is this. So for making the front end of this entire project, I've used the Java Swing library. The Java Swing library is a graphics library that can be used to make simple front ends for Java applets. And yeah, so this is the connection page. As for the code, we have a class connection page, and it's going to implement the action listener and the mouse listener interface so that we can have our interfacing with the events on the mouse and the keyboard. And yeah, uh, here are a bunch of variables that I've defined which we'll need for constructing this GUI, like screen size, icons, the window variable, the sections of the screen like the header, body, and the footer. Labels on the screen, labels are these text values on the screen, password fields, user fields, and the buttons. So here, this is just a bunch of UI settings, like I want the icon of my window to be the icon of my project. Screen size will get the screen size of the project, and screen size returns a screen size object, so you have to actually cast it to an integer to get the actual width and height using the get functions. Now I just make my window with the title SQL app, uh, set what happens when I click on close on the window, set its image size, set the icon image size, and yeah, I don't want it to be resizable, so I put that to false, and define the window layout, and make sure that the window is always at the center of the screen. Next, I am going to define three sections including header, body, and footer. So the header of the window is going to contain the title, and how the border layout works is that you have multiple sections in a page: north, south, center, east, and west. So that's how the page is divided. So using this, I'm going to put the header in the north of the page, body in the center, and footer in the south. So the J panel is just a section of the page. You can think of it like a div in HTML. So yeah, so just normal stuff, setting the background, borders, and yeah, each of these sections has a flow layout. A flow layout is basically a layout where everything is added sequentially to the layout. If the window space runs out, it goes to the next line under it. So yeah, just the initialization of these layouts, the borders, the layouts, and the colors. Yeah. Then we have the welcome label. The welcome label shows this welcome text over here. Welcome to SQL connector. And yeah, just setting the background color, foreground color, font of the label. Then same thing for the box enter connection detail, this label as well. And same thing for the host label, it displays this host name text. User label displays this username text, and password label will display this password text. Now lastly, we need a connection label. Now this label is actually for debugging purposes. Let's say I do this, it won't be able to connect the SQL, and this is actually the connection label. So initially I'm going to set it to blank because the user has not tried doing anything, but as the user tries to connect, it will show him the connection status, them the connection status. So yeah, then we have the text field, the J text field that takes in the host name and the username, and we have the J password field that takes in the password of the user. So these three connection details I'm going to have them input through the user. Uh, all of this other stuff like background, caret color. Caret is this thing cursor thing which we have in any editor. So yeah, that all of these are just UI design. There is nothing very technical going on over here. Next we have the connect button, this button right here, which on clicking should connect to my database. So this is, I've just defined the UI of the connect button over here, and yes. Next I am going to we'll ignore these two lines for a second, and we'll just see what I've done here. I'm going to add the respective components to the respective panels that I created. So the header should have the welcome label, the body should have description label, host field, user label, user field, password label and password field, and the connect button. And then the footer should have the connection label. And then I add all of these sections, the header, body and the footer, to the window using border layout, and I set the to window visibility to true so that the window is finally visible. So this is all about the UI design. Coming back to the event listeners, we need to have two event listeners. Well, actually we don't, we need one, but for the sake of UI design, and like if you want some hover effects, then you might have to use the mouse listener. The action listener is the main button that actually connects to the database. So that will actually trigger the connection to the database. So that's the connect button, and as you can see I've added an action listener which is in this class itself. So I'm referring to the action listener within this class, which I have defined here. So this is the action listener. So it's basically a method where you can write what happens when the action is clicked. So action performed, action event E. So this takes in a parameter of the action event. So the event is going to be within this class, and once you have the event, you can get the source of the event, as in which component it comes from. This e.getSource returns the component from where the event has been triggered. And what I'm doing here is I'm checking if that event has been triggered by the connect button. I'm going to first of all set the connection label text to connecting. So basically, when it takes time to establish the connection, this text will be changed to connecting. Then I have defined three variables, the host, username and the password. And what I can do is I get all of these three variables from these three fields. So host is equal to host field.getText will get all the text that was typed in host name. Username, user field.getText will get all the text that was typed in username, and password.getText will get all the text typed into the password section. This is just a debugging statement to make sure everything works currently. And here I have invoked a function client connect to DB, which takes in three parameters: host, username and password. Now we'll look at the implementation of the client class in a second. Before that, I'm just going to explain this entire class. So now my client connect to DB returns an integer value, which is the status of the connection. Now if the code is not 200, that means the connection was not successful, and therefore we display failed to establish connection, like over here. And otherwise we display connection successful, and we yeah, just change the foreground color to green because successful. And we initialize a new query page. We'll look at the implementation of the query page class also in a second, and we dispose the current connection page. Now these are some mouse events. So whenever I click on the button, I want the background to be white and black. So these are just UI changes. These are quite self-explanatory. Mouse click, so when mouse is clicked, this will happen. It'll change the background and the foreground. Similarly, when the mouse is pressed, released, entered or exiting the component. So these are the mouse events. So from here we have to look into two things: the implementation of the connection client. So the connection client class is right here. Just a sec. Yeah, is right here. So this is the client which actually connects to the MySQL, which is actually run on a Flask Python server. We'll look at the implementation of that too in a second. So over here I have just imported the necessary files, the buffered readers, the file writers, and all the networking imports from the Java libraries. So over here we basically have two main methods. The methods that are the core of this module are send data to server and receive data from server. So what send data to server is doing is it takes in a string in the format of a JSON file. If you are wondering what a JSON file looks like, it looks like this. It's basically a set of key value pairs, and yeah, so it takes in the it takes in a string in the format of a JSON file, and what it does is we first define a URL object which takes in a string and converts it into a URL object, and we use the HTTP URL connection to cast the URL and open the connection to the endpoint over here, and we define what type of action we'll be doing. So we are going to be posting data here, and yeah, and we are going to be defining what type of content are we posting. So we are posting JSON content, and that's what we are specifying here, and we are going to set do output to true so that we have an output after posting. So basically we want to get a response code. So now what we're going to do is we initialize our buffered reader, and we write the JSON data into the buffered reader. We flush the buffered reader, and then we close the buffered reader. So this is going to keep the JSON. This is going to write the JSON data into the buffer. Next, and the thing is, when we are writing the JSON data into the buffer, we are actually also writing it into the HTTP URL. So that's one more thing. And int response code, from the connection object we can get the response code. So if the data has been written, this response code should be 200. If there are any other problems, it can be otherwise. And then once we have written the data, we disconnect, and finally we return the response code. So that was for sending the data. Now we have to receive the data. So receiving data from the URL. So again we define our URL. We do the same thing, defining the network connection statuses. Now we again have an input buffer which actually gets the data from the connection. And now what we're going to do over here is we're going to make a string buffer as well. And now while input line dot in read line, so basically this reads the buffer until it appends into the buffer until my input line is empty. And then once we have read everything into my string buffer, which is called content, and I close the buffer, and I also disconnect the connection. Now once I have the string buffer, I take this content and convert it to a string, my string data, because it's not directly into a string format, it's in the form of an object, string buffer object. And buffered writer, so now I initialize my buffered writer because I want to also write this data into a JSON file. So again I initialize the buffer writer and pass in my file, which is received data.json, and my writer will write this received data, the data received from the server, into received data.json, and then I close the writer. And this is just a log statement to make sure everything works properly, and it also returns the received data. So yes, next, this is the connect to DB method that we saw in connection page. So this takes in, so I have defined a basic JSON structure here. It takes in the host, username, and the password as arguments, as we saw over here. Right here, if we see, we have invoked this function with the host, username, and the password. So yeah, this takes in these and sends them as a JSON data to my server using send data to server, and it returns the response. If there is any other exceptions, it returns -1. Next, we have the send query method. The send query method, which will be used in the query page, takes in the string query as a string and sends it to the server so that it can be executed there. So it takes in a query as a string in the form of a JSON. So that's just query and query. So now I'm going to send that data using the send data to server, and it'll return the response code. And otherwise, if there's any exceptions, otherwise it returns -1. Finally, we have retrieve results. This is going to take the data from the server, which has returned after running the SQL query, and it's going to return the results. So I just invoke the receive data from server as a file function, and that will return my data after the query has executed, and if there's some errors, it returns a blank string. So this is about the connection client in Java. Next, we'll move on to the Python server, and we'll also see how the app connects to the Python server. So if I go to my Python server is here, DB server, and this is actually the server side implementation. So I'm going to just a second. I'm going to run the server. C Python servers Python DB server .py. So as you can see, the server has started, and yes, so this is the server side implementation. What we are doing here is we are going to create a Flask server. So pretty self-explanatory, creating, importing Flask, importing the JSONify library, and importing request. So and we are also going to import my database SQL file which I have created. From that I'm going to import connection. We'll look at the implementation of the database execution side in a second, and yes, and from query generator import star. So this is actually a future prospect where I would generate queries with AI. This hasn't been implemented yet. So yeah, we have, and then we'll finally import JSON so that we can work well with our data transfer. Finally, we're going to initialize the Flask app and define a global connection object so that I can store the connection status of my database. Now I have defined a few methods over here. So the first method is get DB connection. So this method is what is actually used to connect to the database. So what this is going to do is, once my client has sent the connection details over this UI over here, when I click on connect, it sends over the connection details. Let's have a look. Local host, root, and password. So as you can see, it has sent the connection details. These connection details actually go and store in the server side on credentials.json, and therefore once I have these connection details, we read the connection details from, just a second, we read the connection details from the credentials file, and we load the, so it's a JSON file, so we load the contents and then we can access them as key value pairs, and I pass them into the connection function, which is from the other library which I have written. We'll look into that in a second. And now if this connection object returns the connection, so this connection function returns the connection object, then the DB connection value is set to that, and if there's some exceptions, then we just print can't connect without credentials. And finally we return DB connection because that is what we are looking after. That's why we have set this out a global variable so that our connection status is always saved. Now this is a helper method that helps me convert all my data received from the query, because the data received from the query will be in the form of a list of tuples. So I want to convert that into the JSON data so that I can send it over the web, right? So yes, so which I have sent it over the web. So what this does is, this is pretty simple. It takes in the header and the data arguments, and it enumerates the JSON file. Pretty simple, straightforward, just string handling. Now here is how the data is handled. So at the data endpoint, we are going to define two methods, the get and the post method. The post method is used to send the post method will be used to send data back to the client, and the get method will be used to get data from the client. Now my post method gets my post method is going to get the request data if the request method is post, then my request data is going to be equal to request.getJSON. So whatever my request, my client will send in a request, right? So I'm going to get that request, I'm going to get the data from that request and convert it into the JSON form, and that will be the data that I have received. Now I have defined my two files, creds, which is credentials.json, and query, which is query.json. Now I'm going to check if host is in request data.keys. That if it is, then that means my received details are connection details and not query details, and therefore I'm going to write them into the credentials file. Otherwise, I'm going to check if there is query in my JSON keys. That means the details I've received are query details and not connection details, and therefore I'm going to write that into queries.json. Finally, I'm going to return a JSON message saying that the data has been received successfully using the JSONify library over here. Now that is if I have my post method being invoked. Now if I want to get the data from the client, then I am going to use this method. What this does is it calls the get db connection method, which is right here. So this get db connection method is gonna return to me the connection object of my database, and if this works, all well and good. If it returns a none type, that means my connection was not successful, and therefore I just send back a message to the client saying that the connection has not been established. Now I open my credentials file and load the JSON data into the credentials. I open the query file and load the query data into the queries variable, and I create a connection object. I create a cursor object using my connection object over here. Now if query in queries, what this does is it checks if there is actually a query value in the queries loaded over here. Then I just execute this query and get the result set using the cursor.fetch. Also the cursor executes the query and gets the result set. Now except exception as e. Now if there's some problem in executing the query, I just say error in executing the query and return an empty result set. Now what I do is I define two variables, header and result set, which basically header is the headers of the column. So there is a function which is called cursor.description, which returns the header of the description of the table or the result that has been fetched, and the 0th index of that result is actually the headers of the columns. So I assign that to a list. Now in the result set, I use two JSON function to convert my header and the result set to the JSON format. And finally, if it doesn't work, of course it says error converting to JSON. Otherwise it returns the results. It returns to the server, to the client, a status of executed, and then I'm going to return this result set. So yeah, this is the entire database server. Now we are going to look at the implementation of this connection function. So the implementation of this connection function is right here. Give me 1 second, please. So not this one. So yeah, the implementation of this connection function is right here. So what this does is it uses the direct dot connect from our database library and just passes in the host value, takes in the host value, username and password key, and returns the connection object. This is another helper method which we are not using for this. This is for future prospects. So that is that. So this is the entire server side implementation of the project. So I'm going to close this and this. There is also a command line client which we'll look at after looking at the GUI client. So now coming back to the UI, let's say I have this UI, and once I've logged connected, I have this. Now after my connection has been completed, I can execute queries through this. So coming back to connection page, so this page that is rendered over here is actually the query page. The query page is right here. So it is pretty similar to the connection page in UI, and Yeah, so this, first of all, we'll look at a few things. So this UI is basically the same as my previous page. Just there's some label and a text field which takes in the query and an execute button to actually execute the query. So very similar design UI wise, but the main thing is what happens when we click on the execute query button. So when we click on the execute query button, I'm going to say the display label. I'm going to set the display label text as executing. This query executed successfully will be changed to executing. So that is that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the query from that text field, which is known as the query field, this one, and as a string, and I'm going to send query using the send query method in my client, which was discussed earlier. And one now this will return to me the status code. If the status code is not 200, something went wrong, so query execution failed, and I'm going to put that there. However, if the status code is 200, that means the query has been executed successfully, and I put that there. Now I'm going to call the retrieve results function from my class, and that is going to retrieve all the results of the query. So I'm going to retrieve all the results, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to define two objects, calls and data, which are going to get columns and going to get the data. So what these implementations of these methods are actually up here. So the get columns method is actually a method that is going to take my entire JSON file, which is, so my query results are retrieved into receive data.json, right? So I'm going to read that JSON file. Now since I had problems with the JSON parser default library, I have written my own JSON parser. So before reading what this JSON reader is doing, we will actually look at the implementation of this JSON reader. So this is the JSON reader class. It imports some necessary libraries like input output exception, file reader, and buffered reader, also the Java utility libraries. From here we have defined a few methods. We have get read JSON from file. So this method actually does nothing other than converting your JSON file into a string and returning that string. So I use my buffered reader to read from the file, and I put everything into the string builder, which is string builder object. And if there's a problem, I just print the stack trace and return json builder.toString. This will return the entire content of my JSON file as a string. Next, another method that I've defined is get keys from JSON, which returns a set of strings, which are all the keys in the JSON. These values right here are known as the keys. So what this does is, this is just a bunch of string handling where I just check for certain characters, because my JSON always comes in a specified format. So I just check for certain characters, and based on those characters I can extract the keys of the JSON. So once I have the keys, I add them to the set and finally return the entire set. Next we have get array values, because once I have executed a query, all the values associated to the attribute are in the form of a list. So to get that list, we are going to use this. So to get array values, this is going to take in my JSON as a string, and it's going to take in a key. So for which attribute do you want the values, or for which key do you want the values, it's going to take in that. So I initialize an empty array and use a bunch of string handling. So we are going to just check for all the quotes and the key over here, and yeah, this is just a bunch of string handling. And what it's going to do is it's going to find for me all the list of values, and it's going to append it into this list, which is an array list. And it takes in an object, because remember, a database does not necessarily return a string or an integer. It can return data types and stuff like that. So for the sake of simplicity, we have just made a raw object take in all these values. Finally, these values are added to a list, and this list is returned. And boolean is numeric is a helper method that is used to check if the data type returned is a number or a string. So this is just an helper method. So this is the JSON reader implementation. This only we have used over here in the query page. So reader.read from JSON file is going to read the data into this string. Now I am going to use the get. So once I have this, I use the get keys from JSON that returns a set of strings. Now what I do is I convert this set of strings into an array, and what I do is I have return columns, which is a string object, which is a array of strings, and I initialize that to the same size as the length of columns. Now I put each value from the calls into ret calls, and I return the array of strings, which is ret calls, so return columns. Next we have the get data implementation, which was actually used here. So right, I got my columns. So columns are like the header values which are received. So I got my columns using the get calls. Then I have the get data, which actually takes in these columns as an argument and gets for me the data associated with each of these columns. So this method returns a double dimensional array, and not this method, my bad. This method returns a double dimensional array and takes in a string array of columns as an object. Input, here we have our data values which we're going to set into null, and we're going to use the JSON reader again, and basically we're going to read the entire JSON into a string, and we're going to use the get array values for each of the columns. So the thing is, first we are going to retrieve the first tuple which is under each of the first tuple. So what we are going to do is this is going to be going column wise, not row wise. As in databases we have everything going in row wise, but how networking works is that everything will have to be returned in the form of lists which are under a particular column. So I just read the first column values into the list of objects for now, and then from that I can assign more values into. So this is just initializing the first list, and this list will be appended into the object array. So over here over here my data vals has been created into a new object which will be the length of the columns as the length of the columns and vals dot size. So two dimensional array which has these sizes. Now for I less than column length, we get array values for each of the columns, and for j less than value dot size we see that, so we know the format of the list, right? It's going to start with a square bracket and end with a square bracket. So what I'm going to do is, what this does is it replaces these square brackets in the JSON string, so that I don't have unnecessary square brackets and slashes and quotes in my string. This is just doing that. And what I do is, this check object is vals.get dot toString. So from vals, this is going to get my object at the jth index and convert it to a string, and then this object I put at data vals.ij and finally return data vals. Now the problem we'll be facing here is that this data which I have received is exactly the transpose of the data I need. So we need to transpose this m cross n double dimensional array that we have returned to actually enumerate our tables. So we have our transpose array function over here, which is a pretty simple function that just takes the entire array, transposes it, and returns the transported array. So transported, no transpose. Now once I have the transpose array, I can invoke my results window class, which creates a new results window which takes in the columns as the data and the data as the argument. So this is all about the query page. Let's try to execute some queries. So I'm going to try to execute some queries. So let's do select star from grade. So if I execute this query, as you can see, my entire grade table results have been fed into this result page. Now these result table, these grades, they are the same as the one in my run SQL command line. So if I check over here, SQL command line, just a second, yes, SQL command line, some problems about, okay, we'll see it in the server. So we have results fed over here, and as you can see, it has retrieved all the grades. Now how this has worked is this this results window. We'll see the implementation of the results window. So the results window right here, this results window has the same, not the same essentially, but it's the same UI UX aspect. The only thing new is this table right here and this export to CSV button. So first things, the UI aspects are the same. We have the header window, the result table. The only thing different is the results table, which is a JTable component, which takes in the data and the header as the argument and returns a table object, which you can then use as a GUI. So the main thing is once this class is invoked, we have to populate the data. So we are taking the data as the arguments within the class itself. If you remember, we are taking the columns and the data as arguments within the class itself. The main thing is we have to see write table data to CSV. Now write table data to CSV is what happens when you click on export to CSV over here. So when I click on export to CSV, let's say I want to export to CSV, I want to put this in my downloads and I'm going to put it as grades underscore DBMS. So dot CSV, and I'm going to export this over here, and it says exported successfully. Now if I go to my downloads, I can see that this file has been saved, and this is actually the grades of the students over here, which was retrieved in my table results. So as you can see, these are the grades. Now how this export to CSV is working is this function I have written. So what this function does is it takes in the table which has my data, and it also takes in the path of the file in which I want to save. And from the table it gets the table model, and from the table model it can get the column count, and from the column, and then it can get the column name. Over here it writes all the columns. Next it goes to the next line, and then for each of the rows it writes the rows into the CSV file. Pretty simple and straightforward. So all the UI aspects of this are the same. Main is the export button. So once the export button is clicked, what I do is I create a JFileChooser component, which was that file choosing UI you saw over here. This UI is generated using the file chooser component. And if I so if my return value is approve option, so what happens is if my file chooser component, and then I put one file in it and I click OK, so that means my approve option has been selected. Then whatever value has been stored in the JFileChooser, I get that selected file. Now I call the write table data to CSV to write the entire data into the file. That's all that is. If there is some exception, then I have printed that, and I will display a message that some error occurred during export. Again, these are the mouse events. These are just for this hover state. Not here, when I'm hovering over this, it is changing like the background and the foreground. It is that. So this is the results window, and it can export to the CSV file as you have seen. Once I close this, so I close this, I can execute another query like select star from student. It will execute this query as well, and it will give me, oh sorry, I have, yeah, student table does not exist. Yeah, now it will work. I had misspelled students, that was my bad. So as you can see, this is the student data which we have received. So yes, and then again, if you want, you can export this data into the CSV format. Now this is the entire structure of the project. The full project has only these many things, and one more thing that I would like to show, like if I close this and I close this as well, CLS, I also have a GUI client which is going to be only running on the command line. So if I see this is actually the GUI client that will be running on the command line. So in this I will be demonstrating. So if I do run this one, so I'm going to run this, and just a second, not here, not going to run it here, I'll run it in the big screen. Python database amplifier CLI dot py. Sorry, just give me a moment. Yes. Okay, as you can see, it's telling me to enter my host, so I'll enter my host, username, and my password. Now over here I have two modes, query mode and interactive mode. So what my query mode will do is it will execute normally how I want to write my queries. Over here I just enter the query and it will execute. So let's say I do use DA1, and again if I choose query mode and I do select star from grade. So as you can see, it will select all my grade tables values. So query mode will be helpful in executing the queries normally. Any data definition language DML also can be executed using query mode. However, for using the interactive mode, the data manipulation language and the data only DML can be executed through my interactive mode, which what I have made is like you can not DML, my bad, DDL, data definition. Here, if I want to insert the data and like without typing the query, how I can insert the data, this feature I have made. So if I enter into the interactive mode, it will give me three choices. It will ask me if I want to create or delete database, create or delete tables in a database, or if I want to insert data into a table. Three things I can choose. Let's say I want to create a database, so I'm going to put one. So it shows me the list of already available databases and it allows me to create any database that I want over here. So all I have to do is to create a database, I have to just type its name. So let's say DBMS underscore review. If I enter, it will have created the database. As you can see, it is right here. Now if I want to delete the database, nothing I have to do. I have to just type D colon in front of the name of the database I want to delete. So let's say again I want to delete the DBMS underscore review database. So as you can see, it has been deleted. Now if I want to exit this database creation deletion mode, I have to press Ctrl C. It will exit back to the query control. Now if I click on again interactive mode and I want to create or delete tables inside a database, I enter 2. Here it will ask me which database I want to work with. So let's say I want to work with Bharat database. So the thing is, this database does not have any tables in it. So let's work with a different database. So if let's say I want to work with DA1 database, and if I enter, it shows me the list of tables that I have in this database. Now if I want to like create the table, then all I have to do is I have to give the table name, let's say test, and I have to give dash, and I have to give the attribute separated by the comma. So I'm just going to give ID, which is going to be number, and I'm going to give name, which is going to be varchar of 10. So if I enter this, as you can see, the table sorry, I have some syntax error. Just a second, I will uh, test ID int, and over here I will give name car of 5. Okay, now it, as you can see, the table has been created successfully. Last time just some syntax error, mistyped the query. So as you can see, all I have to do is give the name of the table and the attributes along with their properties. It will create the table for me. So this test table has been created. Now if I want to delete the table, all I have to do is give D exclamation point table name. So let's say that table which I made I want to delete. If I do like this, it will have deleted that table. So this is this one. Now let's say I want to insert data into that table which I created. So let's create that table again and insert the data and then we can insert the data into that table. So this now, if I want to insert data into the table, I will select option 3. Here it will again show me the list of databases, and I will choose which one I want to work with. So it was in DA1, and over here I have my tables, and let's say I want to insert data into the new table, which is new over here. So I enter the table I want to work with. It gives me the description of the table over here, and with this description I can start typing the data I want to enter. So how to type the data to enter means type the value separated by the comma. So ID and name. So I just have to type the value separated by comma. Let's say 1 Rohit, 2 Rahul, 2 Rahul, and yes, like this it will insert the data. So now if I do this and I go back and do select, use the A1, and I will do select star from new. As you can see, we have Rohit and Rahul that have been inserted. We have not put any primary key constraints for this, so that's why it is coming like this. These two were already the data in the field. So next, what I want to do is, let's say I want to delete these data. So again, in interactive mode, I can delete data as well. So I have to just choose the table I want to work with, which is new, and I can just have to type name of D, and I have to just type attribute equal to value. So let's say I want to delete the data where my ID is equal to 1. So if I do that, it would have deleted the data. Now if I go and check in the table, the data will not be there. So select star from new. So if you see that all the data where the ID was equal to 1 has been deleted. So this is about the command line only client that I have made. Now let's say I don't want to enter anything. I just have to press Ctrl C. Before exiting, it will ask you if you want to commit your changes to the database. I want to commit my changes. I'll type yes, and it will save the changes, and then it will exit. So this is the command line only client that I have made. If we want to go through the code of this is made entirely using Python. So here I have my connection function, which will take in my username, which will input the user name, host, and the password from the user, and use the dot connect function of the SQL library to connect to the database. Here this database editor function is the one that will be showing me all the list of databases and asking me to add a database or delete a database. So I execute the data show databases to show all the databases over here, and for each database in this value, this cursor object will return the list of databases. I print the database and show it to the user. Next, what I am going to do is, if I'm going to input the name, I give the user the prompt, the database name, or if you want to delete, you type d colon the database name. Otherwise, if you want to exit, you press Ctrl C, where I will exit to the previous control. Now if d colon is in my this one, then I delete that database using the drop command. Otherwise, I will create that database using the create database command. If any other format has been given, I print the wrong format. Now table editor is used to edit the values within the table. So to edit the values within the table, again I will show the list of all the databases which a user has to work with. They will pick. Again they'll show the list of all the tables whichever the user want to work with. They will pick. Over here they can give the table this one. So using some basic string handling, we are able to generate a query that will match the user's requirements of creating the table. Next we have value editor. This is used to insert values into the table, and again similar way this will also be working in. And here we have like creating the connection. So we are going to try to create the connection. Otherwise, if the connection is failing, it will attempt to reconnect, and it will prompt you to re-enter the connection details. And then this query mode is very simple. This will just take your query as take your cursor object and pass your query into the database connection and get the result directly. The raw results this one will be returning. And then interactive mode is basically the other mode which will take in the choice and do what you want based on that choice. And this is the main class where it will be running in an infinite loop, like a menu driven program it will be running. And finally, when you're trying to exit means it will check if you want to it'll ask if you want to commit your changes. If you type yes, it will commit the changes. If you type no, it will not commit the changes. So this is all about the SQL only, command line only client. So this is the full project, and now I'll be executing some of the queries from the DA1 as requested. So I will be opening the queries in my DA1. Please give me 1 minute. Sorry. Uh, DA1. So yeah, this is my DA1 and I will be executing some of the queries in DA1. So yes. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to put this here and I'm going to run my project and execute the queries within my project. Okay. So here if I run the project, wait, please give me 1 second. Yes, and I'll start the server as well. Python db server.py. Okay, the server also has been started. So let me connect to the database real quick. So as you can see, I have connected, and now I will just Windows tab and put this to the. Oh, okay. So this is not resizable. Actually, I'll have to. Yes. So yes. So if you can, as you can see here, I will be copying the query from here and I'll be executing. So for the sake of this, I will be creating a new database. Create database demo, and I'll be using this demo database to execute the queries live. So using demo. Now I'm going to create the table program. So if I do this, if I copy this query, I can put this over here and I can execute. Now if I do DSC program, it should show me this exactly the same which we have created over here. It has also been created over here. Next, I'll be creating the department table. So if I take this and I enter over here and I click on execute, and again I do DSC department, it will be showing over here the department table. As you can see, department ID and department name. Yes. All these result sets can be again put into my exported as a CSV using my project. Again, similarly, I'll be creating the professors table. I'll be creating all the tables in one go now. Again, creating the student table, uh, and some error in creating, not some error, like I made a mistake while typing this, so I had to type an alter table also. And again, course table, and again, advisor table. Again, grade table. So this one will be using the foreign key concepts and all as well. Again, prerequisite table. Again, enrolls table, and offers table. So this is one big relationship. Teachers table, and finally advisors table. So all this will be there. So now if you want, we can see if I do show databases here, show tables here, it will show me all the tables over here. And as you can see, all these tables I have just created have actually been created in the database. So as you can see, tables in demo, and these are all the tables. Now using the insert command, I can insert the values into these tables. So let's say I want to insert the records. So I can run these insert queries, and this will insert the records into the respective tables. If I paste this here, it would have inserted. Paste this here, it would also insert. So all these records will be inserted one by one. So let's say I do select star from program. So as you can see, the two records I just inserted have been inserted. But for the sake of the time, I have already inserted all these records. Just to demonstrate it was working, I have shown now. But I have already inserted all these records beforehand, so I will be showing that one. So that is in a different database actually. So use DA1, execute, and show tables. Yeah. So over here I already have inserted all the data beforehand. Select star from program. So yeah, as you can see, all the data already has been inserted beforehand over here. So all the insert commands, they will be working. There is no issues in it. So yes. So I'm going to skip to the main commands, the DML commands, where like the actual results will be showing. Now again, let's say I want to find the average GPA of all the students. So this is very easy. We just have to select average GPA from the students. So if I do this, as you can see, the average GPA has been fetched. Again, let's say I want to retrieve a list of students along with their courses. So you have to join the course table as well as the student table for this one. So if I do this, as you can see, it has returned to me the exact same result as the database server was returning. Same for this select phone number from student, which if I want to select a phone number for the specific student, I am going to just select phone number from student, where student ID is whatever that specified student will be. So let's say I want to select my phone number, so my student ID is 5007. So as you can see, the phone number has been fetched. Then I want to list all the CSE courses offered. So I know that this course code for CSE courses will have CSE in it. So I select all the details of the courses from the course code from the course table, and I just check if the course code will be containing the string CSE in it. If it is containing, that means these are all the CSE courses. So if I execute this, as you can see, it has listed all the CSE courses, which is structured and object oriented programming and data structures and algorithms. Next, I have the update queries. So for running the update queries, I will first, so the update queries will be running. So the grade, so let's just select and see what the grade table is looking like. So select star from grade. So if I run the grade and see, the grade table is looking like this. So let's say I want to change this S grade for me into A grade. So the update query will be like, I'm going to take this full, I'm going to just copy and change the value. So I want to change for me, which is 22B CE 5007. If I see in the result set, yes, not this one. If I see in the grades result set, so for me and for course code 102L, I want to change my grade to A. So BCSE 102L, I'll be changing this to BCSE. Yeah, I will be changing this one to A grade. So now I have changed it to A grade. Let's fetch the new result set. So select star from grade. Okay, by mistake I have put C as the value, my bad. But yes, as you can see it works. If you want you can put for A also. So I will be changing it back to S because I did S grade that course. So yeah, just a second, I will be changing it back to S. And I'll be changing it back to S. So if I execute this one it will work, and again now if I do select star from grade, then as you can see it has changed back to S. Now the update command, similarly I can update all the commands over here. I can run other update commands. Now we'll be looking at the delete command. They want me to delete the records of some teacher. So let's see how the teacher table and the professor table is looking like. So let's see, select star from teachers. So this will be containing which teacher is teaching which course. So yes, as you can see, this course code and teachers. So we have, let's say I want to delete all the records associated with 45503. So we will be doing that one. So first we will also, so we'll select star from uh, professor as well and see what courses that ID, professor in that ID is teaching. So professor, where professor ID is equal to, and if we see over here we want to delete all the records associated with 45503. So 45503, if I execute this, so we can see that T Rajashri ma'am will be the professor for, is the professor associated with this professor ID. So now I want to delete all the records associated from this professor ID. So since these two tables are actually joined with each other or are like interconnected using the foreign key, I cannot just delete the records from one table. So first I have to remove all the records from the teachers table, then only I can manage. So I have to remove all the records from the teachers table. So I will be removing the records, and then I will be removing all the record from the teachers professors table. So 45503. So as you can see over here, what this query is like, so I'm going to delete from teachers every record that contains this professor ID. So if I execute this one, it has executed, and I do select star from teachers, then I'll be having, as you can see, that it is gone, the ID that we wanted to use. Same we have to do for the professors table. So in the professors table I'm going to delete every record in professor where the professor ID is going to be 45503. So 45503. Now if I execute, it must be deleted. Now if I select star from professor, select all the records from professor, you can see that T Rajashree's ma'am's records have been deleted. Next I'll be using the group by clause to display the count of the number of students in each course. So very simple this is, you have to select the course code and the count in each course code, and you are going to group by course code. So if, as for the explanation of the query, it is going to be selecting course code from the table, and it is going to be selecting the count of records for each course code in that table and renaming that column as count, of course. And it's going to be selecting this from the enrolled table because this has the data of which student has enrolled in which course, and we are going to group by course code. So execute over here, you can see that in which course, each course, how many students are there. So this is, as you can see, the result set has been fetched. Finally, we'll be trying to execute the subquery. So in the subquery, they are told to list all the students who haven't completed a prerequisite course. So if they haven't completed a prerequisite course means the they would have complete. So in my database there is one prerequisite course and one new course. So if the student hasn't completed like the prerequisite course, then the number of courses he has completed will always be less than 2. So I'm going to write that over here. So I'm going to select count of, so I'm going to check that over here. So I'm going to select count of star from enrolls group by student where student ID and having count of star less than 2. This is going to return to me the number of students who have not completed a prerequisite. In the outer query, I'm going to select the student ID and count of star as the number of courses from enroll group by student having count equal to this. So if my count of courses is equal to this prereq is equal to the count in this prerequisite, then I want to return all the student IDs who are having the count less than equal to this count. So if I run this, it will return all the students who have not actually completed the prerequisite courses. So just a second. If I run this over here, as you can see, this student has completed only one course and therefore he has not completed the prerequisite course. So this is all about the project. All these queries I can also execute in the CLI client. It will work, but that is like an extension of the project. So I have already demonstrated how it will be running. So you can please experiment with the command line client. It is pretty cool. And yes, that's it about my project. Thank you very much for listening to me and have a good day.